Welcome back. This is Module 7, and here we're going to talk a little bit more about the MRI contrast agents, their chemical compositions, and their stability. Once again, some of this information was available on the web, so I'm just going to narrate it for you, try to help you understand it a little bit better. What we're looking at here is a slide about the histopathology of NSF. In order to diagnose NSF on a person or patient, you're going to have to do a deep biopsy of the skin, looking for a thickened dermis, increased collagen, fibrosis of the subcutaneous septa, increased circulating fibrocytes, and increased spindle cells. The problem is that we believe gadolinium-based contrast agents, that's what GBCA stands for, may play a role in the development of NSF, kind of as a trigger. There's not proof of a causal effect, but there is strong support epidemiologically that gadolinium-based contrast agents and NSF are linked to each other. As I said before, gadolinium is actually a metal that we inject into a patient. And the reason it's safe is that it's bound by this chelate molecule, or it's tied to it. And as long as that the gadolinium stays tied to the chelate molecule, it'll get filtered out of the kidneys through the nephron system. How NSF develops is that the gadolinium disassociates with the chelate. So the chelate gets filtered out and the gadolinium stays in the system. So when selecting a gadolinium agent to use in your MRI lab, what I want you to know is that there's different ways gadolinium is bound to these chelates. In this slide here, you're looking at a basic chemical format for a macrocyclic gadolinium compound on the left, on the right a linear compound, and depending on how these chelates hold on to this gadolinium, it makes it less or more stable. Here's a list of different chemical and brand names of contrast: Magnavis, Omniscan, Optimark, Multihance, and Prohance. Look at their structures. All but Prohance are linear structures. Prohance is a macrocyclic structure. Looking at the charges, you see that Magnavis is ionic, Omniscan non-ionic, Optimark non-ionic, Multihance ionic, and Prohance non-ionic. So looking at the contrast agents from decreasing order of stability. So the most stable of the contrast agents are the macrocyclic ionic, which are Prohance, or is Prohance. Then linear ionic, Magnavis and Multihance. And the linear non-ionic, Omniscan and Optimark. So how real are the risks? Well, here you're looking at a scale of the the number of NSF cases that have been diagnosed in each brand of contrast agent. What you'll see here is that not one single contrast agent is void of risk. And believe me, as a technologist who's going to be administering this contrast, you have to be aware of it and take precautions to keep your patients safe. So let's look at workflow. I really like this slide for its algorithm on what to do both on inpatient and outpatient sides. So let's look at the inpatient side. An inpatient comes down. First thing it says to look at the GFR, or estimated GFR. How do we do that? GFR is calculated by running the serum creatinine through an algorithm, and we'll talk about that, and I'll give you some access to algorithms here in a moment. But you get the glomerular filtration rate, GFR, for the patient. If it's greater than or equal to 30, go ahead and do the MRI, schedule it. If it is less than 30, consult a radiologist. On the outpatient side, we start with the screening, not just for clearance for the magnet, but also for clearance for the contrast. If they are found to be a high-risk patient and they're over 60, we draw labs, determine what their GFR is. Then depending on what their GFR turns out to be, you either schedule the patient or you consult a radiologist. If you've screened the patient and they are not a high-risk candidate and they're under 60, schedule the exam. So you find out your patient is a high risk. What are you going to do? Well, consult the radiologist. There are techniques a technologist can use to acquire images without contrast. Remember, MRI is tissue specific. You have the power to manipulate the protons to bring out T1 weighting, T2 weighting. So use them. You can do things like MRCPs. You could do MRAs, but use a time of flight mechanism, something that doesn't require contrast. There's also different techniques that the scanners are available, like TrueFisp. Or if they're high risk and these technique factors are not going to help find the diagnosis that they're looking for, consider a different imaging modality, ultrasound, CT. Because even if their kidneys are functioning poorly, we know CT, if we give them CT or regular X-ray contrast, that will get filtered out by the kidneys. What we don't know is whether or not dialysis is going to help filter out gadolinium from the body. I want to repeat that one more time for you because it's very important to understand. If you have a patient who is renally compromised, and you have to get an angiographic, contrast-enhanced angiographic study on this patient. We have gadolinium on one hand and we have regular X-ray contrast on the other. We know if we give this patient X-ray contrast and we send them immediately to dialysis, we can get that contrast out of their body. We don't know the same thing about gadolinium. If it unbinds from the chelate molecule, all the dialysis over and over on a daily basis will not ensure the gadolinium, the metal, comes out of the body. Remember what I said earlier. We can only filter out the gadolinium if it stays bound to the chelate molecule. The moment they come unbound, the gadolinium is a free agent just roaming around in the skin. To review this PowerPoint in its entirety, you can go to this website. This is where I got it from.